Hey there, Ddraig here with a video I've been wanting to make about the Arse DLC. On my channel I pretty much cover mods only for Total War Warhammer 2, which is my passion, but I also wanted to cover big updates to the main game like DLCs. And I could do the traditional unit breakdown, which I do when covering mods, but by the time I get the video out, you'd have seen that type of video numerous times. So I thought it was pretty pointless doing it like that, as I really cannot add any new information what other people have done before. And nobody's going to watch yet another video going over the same information. So like my which overhaul is best for you video, which has proved very popular, I thought I would take a fresh look at the DLC. So in a similar vein, I thought I would look at the major overhauls and how they have changed all the units that CF created in that DLC. So I have information taken from The Boys Will Be Boys by Catep, End Times by the Duke, Radious by Team Radious, and SFO Grimhammer 2 by Venus and his team. So I will provide the vanilla settings and then check out each unit with each mod and highlight changes that the respective modders have changed. When I did this for my which overhaul is best video, I found it really interesting how each modder has different to take and really wanted to do something similar again. Now a quick note here, I was going to add Yuki's overhaul into the mix as well, but there is still to be updated, and according to what I have read in the comments on Steam Workshop and his patron, he had a large update planned but has not had time to implement it, due to life getting in the way, so hopefully he can get to updating his vision of Warhammer 2 soon. Before we get started, I'm really looking for some feedback from people watching this particular video, and of course my subscribers, to see if they enjoyed the video and found it useful and indeed interesting. If indeed so, I'll probably do this in future DLC. Obviously there's a delay due to the modders updating their respective overhauls, but if it's something you enjoyed, please drop a like, or even better, leave a comment with some feedback. Okay, that's enough of my intro. Let's just get into the units, starting off with the High Elves. And all the units here are on Ultra settings. So let's start with the new Legendary Lord of the High Elves, Ephirion. Interestingly, SFO has hardly changed the stats at all. A bit more weapon strength and one extra pace, and has increased the health pool, giving this one the most health of any shown here. While Boyz Will Be Boys have dropped armour, added a magical attack, increases melee attack but drops his actual damage around, but added some much needed AP. Also of note, the lowest armour at 70. Also adds Yes Charge and the lowest HP values, which is a theme of this mod, as the Lords and Heroes are cheaper and not as overpowered as some other mods, and of course the main game. Radious also has had minor tweaks, dropping damage and melee attack by adding a bit more armour to 112. The End Times overhaul makes the Lords and Heroes very powerful, as you can see, with the most damage here and melee attack and defence to match. And the only one which has some anti-charge bonus, which is 5. When it comes to these bonuses, the End Times overhaul doesn't go above 5 as far as I know, so that's the same for anti-charge or anti-infantry. When it comes to abilities, I will only mention changes to the vanilla settings. So for Ephirion, Discipline has changed slightly, as shown here with the vanilla stats on the left, and to the right is the Boyz overhaul, which changes just melee attack. While if you look at the end time, this is quite a significant boost from Discipline, plus 50%, which pushes his stats well over 100. One more extra ability from the Boyz mod is Always Strike First, which is always on the high elf units moving forward. Next we have Inwork, which while it's not part of a DLC, it wasn't a free update, so I thought I'd drop it in here as well. As you can see, again the high attack and defense values from the End Times mod, with huge damage as well as the anti-charge bonus, which is the same on all versions across the board. While Radious drops some of the combat stats down and increases armour and a bit more health over the basis stats. SFO interestingly has made Inwork more to the defence, slightly compared with the other versions, as the melee defence is 10 higher and has the most hit points, while Boyz drops the armour down to 70 and also the slowest, and is also the slowest here, but not by much. but the only one to have melee attack significantly higher than melee defense. It has the lowest charge and of course the lowest damage, but this is pretty much standard across this mod. One more change to talk about. In SFO, this unit has a special ability on its weapon called Cavalry Bane, decreasing the ability of models to run away, which as the name suggests is very effective against cavalry due to their high acceleration. The Order of Dragons has changed in SFO. Instead of a hex, it's a constant ability on himself and anyone in range, adding more speed and melee attack. This makes Inwork handy to be right in the heart of the battle. While Martial Mastery has changed on the High Elves units, which like the Always Strike First ability, adds a bit of range damage and melee attack. Where you can see the end times, that huge increase in stats from this ability. The Archmage I've chosen is a Shadows version, and as you can see, it's pretty terrible in combat, in most versions, except End of Times. While not as strong as combat lords and heroes, as already mentioned, it's still noticeably increased. While no version has the mage as bad in defense as vanilla, the others are similar, but SFO does have a defense at 40 for its version, and does have magical damage on its melee attack. Boyz definitely has the weakest version, with hardly any armour, low health pool and pretty overall stats, but still has those high health buffs I've mentioned before. Interestingly, the End Times renames their Archmages in general. Finally, I've added Alistair here as the Edgery hero, just because I really like the character. Some interesting takes here, but all overhauls agree that Alistair is an aggressive hero, so will have his melee attack higher than his defense. The End Times has made it less extreme than the Lords, and is more in line with other mods. Surprisingly similar stats to SFO, except the speed of the models. In the End Times, it's always a bit much higher than vanilla and other mods. On the whole, most of the mods are on similar footing, with Radious having the lowest of the actual combat stats overall, but they are just charge bonus. The only ability to show is that martial prowess. It's different on non-lords in the End Times, reducing it from 100% to 60% on this unit, and High Elves units in general. Onto some new units now, with the Rangers. The stats are surprisingly different as well as the model count. Radious just has kept it at the 120 mark, while Boyz have dropped the models down to 90, and 100 for the other overhauls. They all seem to keep to the old tier damage dealers against infantry, with them times having a lot of melee attack and of course the fastest. Boyz has also made them significantly better in combat, but the lowest armour and no infantry bonus, but they do have the highest defence. They all seem to share the old charge values with the exception of End Times. One extra ability from SFO, which increases melee attack and speed slightly, showing the ability of the High Elves to get around the flanks with their speed. Next up is the Sylvari Guard, and some quite interesting variations here, with End Times and Radious going heavy on the defensive base stats, 70 for the End Times and 65 for Radious, making them a real defensive presence. Add that silver shield, which surprisingly is only bronze on the Boyz mod, with SFO and Boyz taking a different tactic, as they are more rounded base stats, and SFO having more base damage as well, and almost no charge like vanilla. Abilities: Boyz has extra rank, adding more melee attack to represent the way the High Elves fight. They also have Skirmisher, adding plus 10 leadership when they're in a forest. But SFO has Pursuit in battle, adding to their melee defense over time, boosting up to similar levels of other mods. Also have Azure Form ranks, boosting the melee defense around them and physical resistance, making this unit a lot more interesting than at first glance at the unit card. Onto one of my favourite looking units of this DLC now, the Yinz of Krace. Some very interesting model differences here. 32 for both SFO and Radious, a huge 60 for Boyz, while the End Times is 40. Speaking of the End Times, let's look at them first. Very high leadership and great attacking stats on this unit, while Radious has the melee attack lowered and the melee defense, where SFO is similar stats wise, but melee attack above defense. Also has area attacks, which makes the unit interesting against hordes. Also, there's no anti-infantry bonus on the Boyz overhaul. Abilities wise, SFO has a bleed effect on attacks that represent the clawing and biting of the irons. which with their area effects buff make them even more effective. For the Regiment Renown version of the War Yinz, you can see similar changes to all the units which I just went through with a standard version. Very high stats for the end times, and this time more balanced values for Radious. While the model count has dropped by SFO to only 16 models, which is an interesting way to make this unit a bit more unique and of course elite. While I talk about SFO, they have changed the Mighty War, dropping melee attack as well as leadership, but it's still an active ability for that 40 meter range. Onto the fearsome Iron Chariot of Christ now. First thing I noticed was there was 2 extra models in the Radious unit. Being a chariot, it's obvious the main goal is to charge and inflict huge damage, while across all mods it does interestingly to different degrees. All versions do more damage, with end times maxing out at 135, and only Boyz with no anti-infantry bonus. With high melee attack on the end times version and defense, while Radious has the more melee attack and lower than the melee defense. SFO has the lowest defense but good high melee attack, while Radious it has the biggest charge bonus. Couple of abilities on the Boyz units. Has Stubborn trait, give them a boost for 12 seconds and making them unbreakable. Also, all chariots in Boyz has the Bumpy Ride trait. While moving through the forest, it damages itself. While SFO has added the Breed effect, no doubt to represent the irons crawling at the enemy. The last couple of units in the high elf roster for this DLC is the Arcane Phoenix. First thing to notice is the insane speed on the end times overhaul at 160, and melee attack above all the others, but the melee defense is unchanged for vanilla. The other mods are pretty similar. However, Radious has a lot of armour on their Arcane Phoenix at 90. Other than that, most of the melee attack and defense are similar to vanilla, with only slight increases across the board. While Radious adds an anti-infantry bonus as well, which is the only overhaul that does that. When it comes to abilities, a few changes of note on the Ember Storm ability for SFO. Add some negatives on whatever it hits, dropping accuracy and melee defense. Where attuned to magic is different, as well as adding some much more damage, resilience and AP to its base damage. Boyz also has changes similar to SFO, but yes, with that percent jump as it's only 80%. Lastly, attuned magic just adds more resistance in the end times overhaul. As we have just seen from a standard Arcane Phoenix, the Regiment Renown version has similar changes across the various overhauls. The only change of ability is the Omen of Hope on SFO. It adds a small health regen as well as immune to psychology, but it's a much larger area of 80 meters. At 1 hit point per second, it doesn't sound like much, but it's a nice constant buff. So let's move on to the mean and green of this DLC, starting with everyone's favourite gut, Grom the Paunch. So looking over the overhauls, there's not huge changes for vanilla, apart from the end times, which is traditionally boosting all the stats to very high values. Interestingly though, the speed is not excessive compared to other units we have covered. Other than that, Radious has the nice balance of melee attack and defense, where SFO has made the Grom the weakest in defense. All have kept a high impact charge, with the exception of Boyz, which has the lowest charge values of 67, and also again has no anti-infantry bonus. Ability Rise in Boyz has a special ability called Killing Brawl, which is a chance to kill immediately, and of course it has its Bumpy Ride debuff mentioned on the White Yinz of Christ chariot. Lastly, Grom has a Rag ability in SFO, a multi-stage buff around him, increasing the base stats in a 40 meter circle. Other than that, there is some minor stat changes to abilities he has by default. Now onto the meanest of the bosses, the Black Orb Big Boss. As you can see, high impact damage dealer and is very scary in Radious with very high combat buffs. An anti-infantry bonus with AP. Where End Times follows that theme with huge combat values but not as much as base weapon strength. Boyz does not have a silver shield and less armour than the others, but good combat stats similar to SFO but has the weakest damage. Abilities wise, only Boyz has major changes, with 2 extra abilities: Scrap 'em, adding a buff to itself to increase damage and debuffing whoever the boss hits, and Chop 'em, similar boosting damage and debuffing whatever it hits. These 30-second abilities is very interesting and can be pretty decent when attacking heroes and the Hordes. SFO has added the same WAG ability that the Paunch has, so I've already been over that. For new caster, the giant with a troll hag is pretty similar across a lot of overhauls. Pretty basic melee stat line, but obviously hits hard as it's still a troll. End times boosts up the combat stats to fit the Duke's version of his overhaul. Interestingly though, that Boyz actually has a really good charge bonus on his troll hag, but the overspeed of all the units. Onto the normal river trolls now. As you can see, the vanilla version has lower melee attack than defense, while all the other overhauls are even, or in the case of SFO and end times, the trolls are more combat oriented and hitting. Whereas it AP damage in SFO and end times, and speaking of end times, a very low charge. A lot of the stats are similar. Interestingly, model count is different, as SFO has 6 yes, while end times goes up to 24 models. Ability wise, SFO adds a stupidity trait, adding some buffs to speed and melee attack, and leadership, because trolls are so stupid to know any better. Radious adds them from the Mist's ability, adding some much needed missile resistance to the Arch trolls. Also, in the end times, they have Me Hungry, boosting their leadership while in combat, and is a badly needed buff for any troll. The Regiment of Renown version has similar boosts across all overhauls, in line with what each one did to the other standard version of the trolls. SFO has added this extra ability for its unit, giving it an amusing way of clearing space. Is it your friendly? Who knows, but it's a cool ability to have, and you can only hope this would kill off the Edgery Order one day with that evil poison tick. Onto the stone trolls now, which are similar to the river trolls. They are a lot tougher a unit in SFO and a very high armour, but they are slower than these standard versions. With damage pretty even across the mods, with notable increases in end times and their tanky special ability, allowing them to hold the iron better. While Radious added the armour sundering ability to attacks, which kind of makes sense. Notably, this is a very low melee defense on the stone trolls from the Boyz mod. It has terrible 19 and low leadership as well, making this unit in particular need of support. Abilities in SFO, they inherit the stupid ability, which I went over with the river trolls, and in end times they have Me Hungry ability as well. Onto the Snot Wing pump wagons now, starting off with the basic one. As you can see, some variation in the number of models. Both Radious and SFO increase the count to 6, while end times have increased it to 8. Stats wise, they all agree that they are terrible in defense and similar armor values across the board. Noticeably quicker in end times, but also have the best weapon strength by far, with only the Boyz will be Boyz Overhaul dropping the anti-infantry buff. The Boyz have the Chariot's bumpy ride mentioned before, and SFO brings another WAG ability. Applying to this unit only, adding melee attack as it goes, useful to get going as quick as possible, even though if the defense is weakened significantly. But the goblins, so who cares. On to the next set of pump wagons, the Frappers. Again, the same increase in model count, with Radious and SFO going up to 6 and end times up to 8. More damage across the board, but the actual base stats of all the overhauls, except the end times, are very similar to vanilla. All hit harder than charge, and interestingly, that the end times have more defense than melee attack. Unlike other chariots in Boyz to Boyz Overhaul, this has not got the bumpy road debuff. For obvious reasons, you can obviously flap over the bumpy road. Onto the Regiment of Renown version of a standard pump wagon. Not much to talk about here, as they are the same type of bull pack as the stats already mentioned. It is amusing though to see a chariot with 70 defense on the end times mod, and the actual special ability is the same across the board. The arse of the pump wagons is the very high damage, the spiky version. This very scary looking pump wagon has a huge charge bonus in Boyz mod at 120, 3 times higher than any other mod. Surprisingly no, armor sundering though. Also has a very high melee attack on the end times overhaul, while others have similar stats to vanilla. Onto this amazing looking model now, the Rogue Idol. Interestingly, SFO and Radious pretty much have not changed any stat. Only slight damage increases for SFO and a larger health pool, while the charge is increased in radius. While end times increases stats across the board with a traditional boost in melee attack and defense, and double the amount of damage it can do, with a huge health pool as well. While the Boyz overhaul has flipped the script completely, as this unit is very quick at 70 and a stupid charge of 160, completely flipping how he used it. It is now a flank attacker or just charge straight down the middle. Abilities wise, all overhauls given this model Warbreaker. I'm not exactly sure why CA have not given this a standard instead of just siege attacker. For SFO, there is 2 extra abilities. When attacking, it does Bone Cracker, adding some really nice debuffs to whoever it is attacking, and Rubble, which is interesting and worth taking note of. If your leadership is starting to suffer, it says 100 damage per second. Even some of this amount of hit points will feel it. The Regiment Renown version adds a ranged attack onto this model and increases the numbers for Radious and SFO again are very similar to vanilla settings. Again, the same stats increase are found on the end times version, and yet again the Boyz version is fast and hard hitting with that huge charge, but there's only 4 ammo, which is an interesting twist. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you found it informative and let me know what you think. This is a good way of covering DLC in the future. Any feedback would be most welcome, and I'll see you in my next video.